The verdict is in. You're watching continuing coverage of former President Donald Trump's trial in New York City.
Welcome back to the Salem News Channel's continuing coverage of the Trump trial. I keep doing that with air fingers quotes because it wasn't a real trial. By the way, I'm Andrew Wilkow. This is my second hour. I'm sticking around to host continuing coverage. And by the way, our studios are just a few blocks away from the courthouse, and I can smell the manure. So I'm going to bring in some friends in this hour, like Kevin McCullough, host of That Kevin Show, right here, Salem News Channel. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Andrew. Sad day for America, but I think that we may have just elected our next president, so we'll see what happens.
You know, I agree with that one. I'm trying to be the host and also follow what's going on with social media on my phone here, the broadcast desk, and that seems to be the wide response from people. And you know what we're getting here? But strange bedfellows, people like Justin Amash, who hate Donald Trump, are coming out and saying, okay, I don't like the guy, but you can't do this. And then you've got the usuals. John Bolton is celebrating it. Governor Larry Hogan's all telling us to calm down. But it's kind of weird. There are people that don't like Donald Trump that are coming out and saying, wait a second, you can't go out and do this. We should be settling this at the ballot box.
Andrew, for the last 4 months, every Thursday I do an hour of my show that's focused just on legal issues. And I have surveyed lawyers from the far left to the far right, and there's not a single one of them, not one amongst all of them, not a single one that said that this case had merit on any grounds. And I mean, there were some Trump haters amongst those guys. And I'm not the only one that's figured this out. You're not the only one that's figured this out. You know who has figured it out? The independents in the middle of America that sit here and say, oh my gosh, if they can do that to one of the most powerful men on the planet, what can they do to me? I mean, we've got friends that immigrated to this country from former Soviet and communist countries that are calling and texting and crying and weeping tonight because they said, this is the kind of crap that we left in those other places to come to the place that we thought was free. And here it is happening all over again.
You know what's amazing about the talk radio medium, which I would say without reservation conservatives dominate. And I think the reason for that is that we will talk to our audiences. I won't say the regular people because we are regular people, right?
Yep.
Some of these people sitting on their high horses at MSNBC and CNN wouldn't last 5 minutes in our business, Chris Cuomo. I'm getting calls from people with Romanian accents, with Cuban accents. I'm getting people who identify as people whose family came here from China, and they are saying fearfully, passionately, in some case tearfully, that they feel like this country is slipping into an abyss, that they can't believe what they're seeing in the United States of America. This is banana republic, third world dictator stuff.
It's not just that. It's the fact that there is a motivated, powerful, somewhat empowered political party that is similar to the days of Stalin, willing to use its power to do whatever is necessary and whatever cutthroat means calls for it to try to hang on to that power. And you've already seen in the sitting president's remarks tonight, you've already seen in some of the far left regions of the country tonight, people saying that this is in essence their coronation for the next chapter. Andrew, you and I both talk to the real America every day. And I'm going to wager a big bet that what we are going to see is America on fire, wake up and say, hell, if it's on my watch, we're not letting this happen. And I think that you're going to see that soon. You know, the Trump donation portal has crashed twice since the verdict was announced because people are trying to give money in such rapid fashion to get this man reelected. He knows, we know because he has nothing to gain by doing this, by the way. Can I just make that really clear? Donald Trump could have a really nice life just going off on his own and saying, F you to the rest of the world. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't want to be bothered by anybody. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he puts his entire reputation, wealth, riches, legacy that he's left for the world around him. He puts all of it on the line so that he can save you and me from what is happening to him. That's what America is seeing tonight. And if we don't wake up and say, yeah, it's time to get active, it's time to get real busy about this because we're going to lose our country, well, then we might deserve to lose it. Who knows?
When they say that Trump is corrupt and, Biden is this, wonderful public servant, I always reply with, I don't worry about the man who went to Washington and lost a fortune. I worry about the man who went to Washington and made his fortune.
Every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. And that's the difference. Donald Trump's personal wealth was diminished by at least $2 billion in his first term. And since that time, there's probably a good deal more. And yet he's willing to lay it all on the line because he cares about the idea that our founding fathers cared about, which was this place of ultimate freedom and democracy and a voice that can be had by the everyday American. These people that are trying to shut him down, they don't care about that. They want to stay in power.
It's really, it's to be expected. So I'm not going to shock anyone. That they're popping champagne over at the DNC. They're calling Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell and Jake Tapper. Let's get together for dinner. The club, they had their victory. And I'll say this: I said it on my radio show 2 days ago. I go, right now there's someone sitting at an edit bay making that convicted felon campaign ad. They're ready to roll it. They probably already rolled it out.
Haven't seen it, but I anticipate that you're right about it.
Yeah. This is something that was well rehearsed. The players were put in place. This was something that was once they couldn't take him off the ballot, they shifted their focus here. I got 20 seconds.
There's no doubt about that. And Wilkow, we have to keep fighting this fight every single day. And your viewers and listeners are a part of that.
I agree with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to continue on with our coverage. Look, I don't mean to bring a somber tone to it. In the end, this is going to get overturned on appeal, okay? Donald Trump is going to get elected president of the United States for a second time. And you want to know why that is? Because nobody's better off 4 years into Biden's presidency. Our coverage continues.
The verdict is in. You're watching continuing coverage of former President Donald Trump's trial in New York City.
Welcome back to the Salem News Channel's continuing coverage, and I keep doing this air quotes, of the Trump guilty verdict, because we know this is a sham. We know this was a kangaroo court. We know this is nonsense. Now, normally, this would be Jenna Ellis's hour, so we're going to bring her in, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jenna Ellis, thanks for joining us during your show.
Yeah.
Your
well,
show.
I appreciate you having me. On my show. So, thanks so much for that.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you for giving us your time, but technically this is your time. We've been pretty heavy in the coverage tonight with lawyers, and I kind of want your hot take on this, because as a non-lawyer, I didn't understand how a long dead letter misdemeanor turned into a 34-count felony 5 years past the statute of limitations, attached to a federal crime that the county prosecutor has no jurisdiction over.
Yeah, it's magic, right? And it's what we call a legal fiction. It is a completely fictional statement of facts. I mean, this whole thing was just bogus to begin with. And we all know that. This was a political target of President Trump in search of a legal outcome. And now Joe Biden can run for the rest of his campaign on the messaging talking point that Trump is a convicted felon. And it won't matter what the appellate court does, whether he gets jail time or not. I mean, all of those are ancillary incidentals to this. What is going to matter is that the Democrats are going to say Trump was now convicted by a jury of his peers. That's all that they were seeking. And remember, the very first impeachment of then President Donald Trump had exactly the same legal substance and merit, which was entirely zero. But the Democrats all ran on this premise of Trump has been impeached, and it didn't matter that he wasn't even convicted by the Senate. It was just that Trump was impeached, then he was impeached twice. And so this is all about messaging and optics to the Democrats, because they are so much more concerned about the court of public opinion and the ballot box than they are about preserving the integrity of America's institutions.
Earlier in the coverage, we had a retired Secret Service agent who's now in the private sector, and he said it's not likely the Secret Service is going to bend and say, okay, you could put him in Rikers Island. He said the Secret Service is likely to demand that he do house arrest if there's going to be any incarceration in Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago. We're not putting the president in Rikers Island. We're sure not sticking him in that wherever Jeffrey Epstein was a few blocks from here. Because that was my question. Like, who's in charge now? Is it New York City Corrections? Is it Secret Service? He's like, Secret Service, they're not bending for anyone.
Well, that may be true, but ultimately, according to the court system, I mean, the judge has the ultimate say. And if he determines that Donald Trump has to serve a period of incarceration, then that's going to be what happens. I mean, the Secret Service can protest all they want, but they are not the judge in this instance that has the sentencing ability. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what Judge Merchan does here, because I think he's chomping at the bit to put Donald Trump away, and much more than house arrest, he wants to take away his phone, his ability, to send out Truth Social posts and all of this. And I mean, why go to such great lengths for the Democrats to seek this type of conviction if they don't go all the way? I mean, we know that the Democrats, if they have one consistent principle, it's that they're hypocritical. And their second consistent principle is that they overplay their hand. They have overplayed their hand here. Why stop here?
Well, they also know one thing: Republicans don't fight back very much. They just don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been watching social media. We've all been doing this tonight. I've been doing it in the breaks, And, I see Larry Hogan, who's like, everyone's got to respect the ruling here. And John Bolton, who I'm sure is hanging out with a bunch of his Democrat friends. They know that Republicans are likely to cave when it comes to any kind of pushback. Now, my hope is, and we had Representative Harriet Hageman on the program, that Congress investigates the connectivity here, right? You've got this weaselly little figure, Norm Eisen, who went to Harvard with Barack Obama, lead counsel in the first impeachment. Then he's the one that wrote the novel legal theory about taking Trump off the ballot for insurrection. He was at the court a few blocks from here every day. We know Matt Colangelo didn't just resign from the DOJ for no good reason to become an associate prosecutor in a county office. So there's connectivity here, and I think it all leads back to Barack Obama.
Yeah, I think that that's probably true. I mean, we're seeing that Joe Biden is basically effectively serving the third term of Barack Obama, and they want him to have a fourth term as well. But you're absolutely right. The GOP here is utterly useless, because while they're going on, and the first thing that Team Trump tweeted was about fundraising, what are they practically going to do with that? I mean, there were so many concerned and outraged tweets, and there will, I'm sure, be letters that are sent by members of Congress, the Speaker of the House. But who cares? The Democrats have effectively weaponized institutions of government. They are using power for political purposes effectively, while the GOP just sits back and says, oh, as long as we fundraise more and as long as we can line our pockets, then that's all that ultimately matters. While you and I, as regular citizens, Andrew, are sitting back and saying, no, somebody actually needs to take power and hold some of these people who are corrupt responsible and accountable for their actions. But I don't see the GOP actually having the guts or the political will to do that. And that's why our country is in the shape that it's in.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more hopeful with Chairman Whatley and co-chair Lara Trump in charge. I don't know that I'd have a lot of faith in Ron McDaniel or Reince Priebus. And I'm also going to say this as well. Can you stick around for a second segment on your show?
Sure, I would be happy to. And, I usually am here the full hour. So if I'm getting out early tonight, then, thanks so much for filling in. But sure, I can sit in another second.
I think if Trump wasn't the personality that he is, the megawatt personality, I think if this were a Mitt Romney or a John McCain, they would have been crushed already. This would have been over. I don't think that many other Republican nominees would have had the wherewithal to sustain this. Okay, we got a little bit less than a minute.
Yeah,
In your
I
show.
think that's true, but I'm gonna say I'm gonna say something on my show that's even more controversial than that. I think the GOP is all too willing to play the Democrats' games under the Democrats' rules and on the Democrats' playing field. Because if the GOP were actually smart, as much as Trump, may be a victim of political lawfare, all of this, we would have simply said, no, let's fight that fight, but let's not even come to the party. Let's nominate someone else that doesn't have this type of baggage so that we can then go and fight the fights that need to be fought. And so that's why a large reason of why I supported Governor DeSantis and why I think there needs to be a serious conversation in the GOP about whether or not we still should have Donald Trump as the nominee. And I know that's very controversial, but we need to have the conversation.
Well, we will be having the conversation. This will be coming back to your show right after this.
The verdict is in. You're watching continuing coverage of former President Donald Trump's trial in New York City.
All right, welcome back to the Salem News Channel's continuing coverage of the Trump guilty verdict. I keep using the air fingers quote. Of course, I'm Andrew Wilkow. Technically, this is Jenna Ellis tonight, so we're going to bring back Jenna Ellis to her own show. You wanted to talk about, and look, I'm just going to straight up tell you, I'm ready to vote for Donald Trump. I'm ready for this. I do love Governor Ron DeSantis, though. So I remember Never Trump, Never Cruise. And on my radio program, I created a thing called Dark Heart Island. And it was for all of us that wanted no part of Republicans knifing each other. And it became a staple thing. We would joke about making cocktails. I was going to make some T-shirts. We could all go out to the island and, let it all burn. I didn't want that with Governor DeSantis. I didn't get the people that were like, I know DeSantis is the worst guy in the world. He's like the best governor the country has. Okay, he's the good guy, and him and Trump have patched things up. But I do think that a lot of people are more excited to vote for Trump now than they were before.
Oh, sure. And I certainly don't blame anyone that wants to still have Trump as the nominee or did even before this quote unquote guilty verdict, right? I mean, this is where people have to remember that it's actually a good thing to have a deep bench and a wide bench of candidates for a primary. And I never saw the whole, oh, you're a traitor for supporting DeSantis or Trump, whatever. We can all hash that out. But what I'm talking about now is not a DeSantis versus Trump, but it is a Trump versus Biden. And whether or not this guilty verdict does play into the Democrats' hands and whether Trump can actually overcome that messaging to independents, moderates, suburban women, disaffected GOP Republicans, and people who frankly think a little bit differently than you would, Andrew. And I think that that is a genuine concern. And if the bottom line for conservatives is to truly make America great again, save it from a fourth term of Obama, then we need to have this conversation, because this country is not all about Donald Trump as much as he would like to think so, and as much as some of the voters would like to think so. We need to actually say, what is the best weapon that we can use to ensure that Joe Biden does not get that second term or the fourth term of Obama? And I don't see that after this successful political verdict that should be Donald Trump. And while a lot of people would say, well, then, you're just caving to the Democrats and, all of those arguments. Well, sometimes you need to, when you're backed into a corner and you see that the strategy that they are playing out is working, you have to upset the status quo and you have to change the rules and change the game and say, I'm not going to keep playing by your narrative. And I think the GOP needs to seriously consider that.
Well, Trump cleared the field pretty quickly, and I don't see anybody who's going to step up and do it. Ron DeSantis has already said he endorsed Donald Trump. I want to get you on this. I said earlier on my radio program on Sirius XM Patriot, and I said it earlier in our coverage, that Republican prosecutors that have Democrat officials in their jurisdictions better start getting real curious about non-disclosure agreements and real estate transactions, and perhaps people who might have gold bars in their closets. That if this is the game they want to play, you can't say, well, I don't want to stoop to their level. Queensberry rules don't work when someone's got brass knuckles. You either have to give them a taste of their own medicine, and then when they don't like it, maybe we agree to stop it. But Republicans, if Republicans just let this stand, forget Donald Trump for a second, they would, this is going to be going forward. If the next Republican nominee is Nikki Haley, now I don't think it's going to be, or a Mitt Romney type, or someone who's considered more acceptable to the Sunday morning talk shows, the Democrats have already showed us their teeth. They are not going to treat the next Republican nominee with kid gloves.
Right. I mean, we have to look at this the same way as we did as a country in World War II, when other countries were literally arming themselves with nuclear technology, and this was a Cold War and an arms race. Well, the Democrats have effectively weaponized a nuclear option with this verdict. And if Republicans don't arm themselves as well, and we all agree to a ceasefire and we agree to mutual disarmament and a compact in terms that we can all live with, then we are going to see the Democrats pressing that nuclear button, and we will not like the outcome. So I completely agree that the GOP can't just talk about this. We have to actually strategize, and we have to understand what it means that the Democrats have literally armed their nukes at this point with the justice system.
And, you know, one thing about the messaging, and you're right, it's twice impeached, it's now convicted felon, but millions of people are going to still be looking at their grocery bills and go, I'm not better off. And whatever the hell they say he did in New York City is not going to bring down the price of a gallon of gas or a pound of ground beef. It's not going to make my paycheck go any further. I know what the economy was like in 2018, 2019, pre-pandemic 2020. People don't have to know the nuances of Federal Reserve policy and what inflation actually means, other than how it affects their kitchen table budgeting, to say to themselves, okay, these people said he covered up something he may have done with some girl back in 2006, I might add. But if we keep this man in office, Joe Biden, we're going to get another 4 years of what we're going through right now.
Yeah, and I think that there will definitely be people who see it logically that way, and they see that no one can possibly be worse than Joe Biden. But I mean, I live here in the free state of Florida with a lot of very conservative, red state Republicans, and even some of my own neighbors that I've talked to about this, even just today after the verdict, are saying, I don't know that I can vote for Donald Trump because this really concerns me about the state of the republic. And wouldn't it be better to just write someone in? I mean, they're not saying they're going to go as far as voting for Joe Biden, but they're very concerned about what this verdict optically portends. And I do think the Trump campaign needs to not brush that off. And Trump would be a lot wiser, instead of just claiming victim and focusing, like the Democrats want him to, on this verdict. He should focus exactly on the economy, on the open border, about the great replacement, that Joe Biden is literally letting hundreds of thousands of illegals into the border, and the Democrats want to give them all citizenship. I mean, these are things that actually matter. And if the GOP was smart, they wouldn't be blasting all this stuff about the verdict tonight. They would be talking about the real issues and the danger of Joe Biden. What the Democrats are very effective at doing is simply turning the conversation around and saying, we don't want to talk about anything that is bad for us, and we want the GOP focused only what we want them focused on. And we just play along, which is terribly tragic, and I think ultimately won't yield the best results for November.
All right, we are out of time in your show tomorrow night. Jenna Ellis tonight will be back in its normal time slot, and you won't be seeing me. You'll be seeing Jenna. Thank you for joining us on your show.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, more continuing coverage coming up right after this. All right, welcome back to the Salem News Channel's continuing coverage, and I have been doing it all night, of this Trump verdict. Let me bring in one of my best buds in the business. We work together here, and we work together on the Patriot Channel on Sirius XM. Stacey Washington, I know you have a lot to say because you're a big mouth radio host like me.
Yeah, and so full disclosure, I was out running errands. Today is my one block of time in the afternoon where I can actually get a few things done. So I'm going to pick up my contact lenses. I'm picking up a few things, and I'm constantly refreshing Twitter because I got the notification from Salem News Channel, hey, this verdict is coming in. And I actually thought that it might be a hung jury. So when I saw a conviction on all 34 counts, I felt like someone had just yanked me over to the side and grabbed me on the side of the face and screamed in my face, this was preordained. This truly was rigged. We've been saying it's rigged, but deep down and on the surface, I've really been expecting jurors in New York to still be Americans, people in that jury box, for there to be at least 2 or 3 who would just step up to the plate and say, look, this is not right. This man is, we're talking about bookkeeping errors. These are misdemeanors, right? And again, I'm not a lawyer. I just watch a lot of episodes of Law and Order. I know enough to be dangerous on this topic, but I've interviewed enough experts, enough attorneys, enough jurors, enough people who've done all this stuff professionally. And Andrew, they've all said that there is no there there. He didn't even know what he was truly charged with until after the defense rested. So nothing about this case is typical or normal or something we should be seeing in America. You know, we have our system of jurisprudence is hundreds of years old. It was actually something the Anglo-Saxons set up first. Innocent until proven guilty, jury of your peers, due process, knowing what the charges are before you even, getting the equal access to the evidence, all of these things. If you do the research, you'll find the system is so old, they used Old English, where you almost can't read it. It's English, but it's a different language. That's where our system comes from. And today we just watched it smashed on the altar of an election and a senile old man who wants to remain president and an agenda by the left, the open border. That's what we saw today.
I tried, look, I'm a non-lawyer too, and I've interviewed the experts, and all night we've been talking to lawyers, and they're telling us in plain English that there are components to this, like, how is Alvin Bragg trying a federal case as a county prosecutor? He doesn't have that jurisdiction. I mean, if Trump was running for the mayor of New York City or a city council seat, okay, that would be in his purview. We've had this crazy new concocted theory on top of, and I've been mentioning the name Norm Eisen all through the night, because this is a guy that went to Harvard with Barack Obama. He was the lead counsel in the first Trump presidency. And no one paid attention to it when he said in December 19, 2022 on CNN that he wrote a legal paper on how to remove Trump from the ballot on the accusation of insurrection, that one need not be convicted of insurrection to be removed from the ballot because of insurrection. And I was like, did anybody notice this? We were playing it on this show, on my radio show. I was like, this is crazy. We're talking about convicting someone of a crime, punishing them, handing down a sentence when they haven't been convicted of the Insurrection or Rebellion Act. And I see this little weasel coming and going from the trial every day, or was seeing him. And we're getting into legal theories that are technically illegal. The idea that you're just going to resurrect a dead letter misdemeanor, pin it to a federal crime that you don't even identify, break it up into 34 little pieces, and say this man's been convicted of 34 felonies like he is a mass murderer?
Yep. And so contrast that with what the Democrats are currently doing in cities across the country, where you just had the latest out of it's still the Midwest, but you have Boston, right? The mayor of Boston saying they're not going to prosecute petty crimes, theft. No. There's a whole laundry list. It's too long for me to share with you here. We don't have time. But I also did the same. I did the same look. We have this system, right? And we're in this country. We trust this system. We know it's not perfect. We know sometimes innocent people are convicted, but for the most part, we trust the system. And so do billions of people around the world. If they could, 3 billion additional people would live in America, because here you don't have to pay somebody off to be innocent. You can be innocent until proven guilty. We have this beautiful lady justice. She's blind. She just weighs your guilt or innocence, and that's it. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it works better than any other system there is. You would rather be convicted of something here in America or tried for something here in America than in the CCP or in North Korea. And so this is what you're talking about. It just blows the mind. And it's not about partisanship. I keep saying you don't have to love Donald Trump to understand that this is a takedown effort. This is an attempt to keep him from being the president of the United States, to keep him from campaigning against Joe Biden, who's a husk of a man who doesn't even know where he is most of the time. This is an attempt to steal an election by preventing the only person who can actually win in a landslide from campaigning and being a part of the process. And so everybody, I'm reading all day today, all day. I was even doom scrolling in the middle of the night, as usual. That's my thing. I literally read that for a case like this, even with it being trumped up and patched together the way you described, Andrew, there's no way he's supposed to serve jail time as a first-time offender, nonviolent, conviction. But there could be the chance that Judge Merchan would still send him to jail because that's the only way they can keep him off the debate stage. That's the only way they can keep him from doing his special dance all the way across the country at the rallies. So it's a very serious moment we're in right now. I kind of felt deflated today because I just didn't think we'd go here. I never thought I would see this in our country. And I already said it. My video went viral. Millions of people have seen me say, I will vote for the felon. I don't care what they say about this man. I'm voting for him early for this election cycle in November.
You know, you just brought up something that I didn't even think of. And thank you, the debate. You know that it's going to be, you know that Jake Tapper is going to lay into it. Biden's going to keep pointing, my opponent's a convicted felon, my opponent's a convicted felon, my opponent's a convicted felon. Now we know it's going to be overturned on appeal, but that doesn't matter. Jenna Ellis said it earlier that it's already out, right? He's a convicted felon. Joe Biden's going to have that in his back pocket whenever he's in a losing moment in the debate. Thank you for, yes. We got 30 seconds.
He can say whatever he wants. Look, we're counting on him being doped up and in the same condition he was in at the State of the Union. Andrew, do you think they can pull it off? Do you think they have enough drugs and they think they can get their timing right? I'm looking forward to seeing him there. And even if Trump has to appear virtually, I don't care. I think he's going to mop the floor with Biden. He can say he's a felon, but what about the gas prices? What about the chicken thighs? What about the Middle East? Talk to me about that open border. 15 million additional people in the country. Your kids are going to school virtually because migrants are in their gym and in their school. Talk to me about what Americans are polling on. This isn't even in the top 20. Abortion and Trump's trials are not even in the top 20 of the things that people are concerned about in America today. And that's not me. That's every poll, left, right, and center. It's still game on for November. Trump's still the nominee, and this is going to be a bloodbath for Biden.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. See you soon.
All right, coming up, I'm going to wrap up my time, but coverage will continue on the Salem News Channel. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., Trump will be holding a press conference at Trump Tower. You can get all commentary and reaction from Mike Gallagher and Hugh Hewitt. But let me wrap with this. We had an on-site reporter, and I know him as the big voice of town hall news on Sirius XM Patriot, where I am during the day. Greg Cluxton, how you doing, sir?
Hey, good evening, Andrew. I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
All right, so you were on site there at the courthouse. Just tell me what it was like outside, what was going on, what was the scene?
It was a pretty typical day, I think, in terms of Lower Manhattan. There were some obviously a large police presence, and the media presence was really the largest contingent there. But there were, as the day went on, more curious onlookers. There were a handful of folks in red MAGA hats and some holding signs and all the rest. But there wasn't a huge boisterous crowd. But then more people started filling in late in the afternoon when word came that the jury had reached a verdict. And then after the verdict was announced, it still was a pretty calm scene, I have to say, for such a history-making trial. But there were some detractors, some Trump detractors who were shouting and chanting, "Lock him up," and that kind of thing. But it was overall pretty peaceful, considering the consequential decision that came down today.
You know how this works when you're in media, right? You're working at a radio or television facility. You have all the other networks on a wall of panels. We were scrambling, right? We didn't know there. I mean, normally I'm writing my monologues. I'm getting ready for the program, and we didn't know if the verdict was going to come down. Once we got word that it was, we started running to the TVs, and it seemed like they were, especially MSNBC, there are producers inside the courtroom. How many of these networks had special access to the inside of the courtroom?
So there was a rotating basis for networks to have a person, a staff person, a reporter inside the actual courtroom, and then there was an overflow media room inside the court building. And so people there were just simply in a room just basically down the hall from the courtroom, and they would rotate in and out. So the actual number of media representatives that could actually be in the courtroom for the actual verdict being read, I don't know what the exact number was. It wasn't really large. And there were, of course, more people in the overflow room, and a lot of us, most of us outside waiting for that sort of TikTok release of all of the verdicts on all of the felony counts.
Were you chatting it up with any of the other correspondents and reporters? I mean, Salem, Town Hall, everybody knows it's conservative. Were you in the mix talking to anyone who might not, like us?
Sure, that happens, and I ran into a couple of reporters that I know from Washington and work with and see in Washington media circles. But people, no matter whether they work for other networks or whatever news organizations, people have different ideas about what to expect and their political thoughts. I think for the most part, there's respect for people if you've demonstrated that you're a journalist and you take your job seriously. Hopefully, I've done that.
Were any of them getting? Did you see anyone who was considered the unbiased media getting giddy as the information was coming out?
I really didn't. I was focused on writing my initial stories as soon as the verdict was announced, and then of course we heard from the former president as he was leaving the courtroom. So I had my head buried in my laptop and my phone. I had headphones on, so I was working away. There always is a little bit of interest when you see some of the crazies who show up at these extreme folks on either end of the political spectrum, and they're making a scene out in the park across the street from the criminal court building. You had one guy dressed up in an orange prison jumpsuit with a Trump mask on, so he got a lot of attention from photographers, that kind of thing. But for the most part, people seem to be, at least from my vantage point, going about their business.
Well, let's not forget some guy set himself on fire out front of the. We've forgotten that story. Some dude literally is engaged in self-immolation, burned himself alive, and then we saw the woman earlier today who was showing us her parts, and it was a little kooky when that happened.
Yeah, I did miss that, thankfully, and
it is the Salem News
politics,
Channel,
Andrew. Yes, but also these kinds of events, whether it's outside of a trial of this nature, whether it's in Washington, D.C., outside the steps of the Supreme Court building, when there's an abortion case or some other very politically divisive issue, we see folks kind of come out from the woodwork, some wearing costumes and masks and all the rest. And obviously, there are some just everyday folks there that are also just curious onlookers.
Are you going to be at Trump Tower tomorrow for his press conference?
Yeah, I'm checking in with the media team with the Trump people, and I'm still be here in New York tomorrow. So hope to cover that. Yes.
Yeah, that's gonna be the crazy one, right? Because it's gonna be on Fifth Avenue, a lot of traffic. That's where people have set up demonstrations previously. That's the edifice to the name Trump Tower. So I expect there's gonna be some craziness tomorrow.
Yeah, probably. And already, there's kind of this political overtone, not surprisingly, in terms of the reaction to the verdict. You had the Trump himself saying that he said the real verdict would be coming on November 5th, which is, of course, Election Day. And in a social media post from President Biden, he said the way to keep Trump out of the Oval Office was at the ballot box. So both of the top candidates agreeing that Election Day is still going to be very important.
Look, I don't want to contaminate your journalism, but I don't think for a second that Biden was at all surprised by the verdict. We have a lot more digging to do. I have said that Republicans need to look into the communications of people like Matthew Colangelo and Alvin Bragg and others. That it's unheard of that you have a third in line at the DOJ quit his job to go become an associate prosecutor in a county office. That wouldn't have happened unless the guy's name was Donald Trump. I mean, I think we all know that. I think we all know that they would never have spent the resources. Even you have Alvin Bragg, who's letting murderers out of prison. They wouldn't have spent the resources to go after a bookkeeping misdemeanor from 7 years ago, if not even longer, related to something that happened in 2006. If this was some random guy on Wall Street. All right.
Oh, we had a freeze in the connection, but I would say whether there's an investigation or not, Andrew, it'll be interesting to see. And I think we already have some indications about how the American people are going to vote now going forward on this. It doesn't appear, at least initially, and there was even just a recent poll this week indicating that a lot of voters aren't going to be swayed any differently because of the outcome, or at least not enough voters, meaning the Biden camp is still supporting him and the Trump crowd is still supporting him.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Well, that, Greg Cluxton, thanks for joining us. That wraps up my time. Stay with the Salem News Channel for continuing coverage. Good night, America.